We need to wake up. We need to say, no, this is not going to happen, not moving forward. We have evolved as humanity to the point where this is not okay ever.
Hi everyone, this is Nihir, the host of Manor House podcast. Today we're joined by someone very special, Paul Hutchins. He is a tremendously successful entrepreneur, the author of the upcoming book Sound of Freedom, and the executive producer of the Anti-Trafficking movie Sound of Freedom. He is also the founder of Child Liberation Foundation and Liberating Humanity. After leading a $40 billion real estate fund, he walked away from business and went undercover on child rescue missions. Since then, he's been on 70 missions in 15 countries, either leading those missions or holding a critical role. He dedicated his life to ending trafficking and healing the trauma that fuels it. He is also a firm believer in building wealth with integrity, living with purpose, and embracing a mindset of abundance. So we have so much to learn from him today, and we're so excited to dive into all of these topics. We're also going to talk about how to blend in business, philanthropy, and creativity and storytelling to make a global change. So let's dive right into it. I want to go back to your early beginnings. Even though you went through this transformation, it's still very inspiring how you've built that success. You built and managed a $40 billion real estate fund. Obviously, that requires a lot of work. So I was curious, what were some of the beliefs and habits that allowed you to build and maintain a $1 billion business from scratch, basically?
I had a mentor in my early 20s. He said, Paul, the most valuable piece of real estate you'll ever own is the 6 inches between your ears. Now, I've changed that. I believe that the most valuable real estate is about a foot below that, right, in your heart. But he said the 6 inches between your ears, if you can develop that, everything else works. He said, I don't even want you to know if your car radio works. He said, listen to audio programs on business and success and leadership and relationships and all of these things. He said, if you do that every single day, instead of just listening to the radio and whatever else, you do that every single day. He says, 3 months from now, nobody will know that you're doing it. 3 years from now, your inner circle, your family, all of them will know because you'll have changed so much. 30 years from now, most of the world will know that you've done it because you'll have made such a powerful impact in the lives of so many people. And so that's what I did. It was funny, years later, I bought LeBron James's Range Rover from a celebrity broker when he was actually here. Yeah, exactly. And it had like $60,000 subwoofers or speaker system. I mean, it was badass. This thing was so nice. And my kids are like, Dad, what are you going to do? Listen to your self-help programs on your $60,000 audio pro. I said, you know what? That's the reason I can afford a car like that. It's because I did listen to those. In fact, one of my kids was like, Dad, the only reason why you like 80s music is that's the last thing you ever heard. Because I did. I just was always growing mentally, etc. Now, fast forward, I had that first successful company in my 20s that helped people with anxiety, depression, etc. I sold that, started investing in real estate, realized that if I didn't hire guys smarter than me, I was going to lose all my money in real estate. So I put together a team. In fact, it was funny. John Pennington and I are the co-founders of a company called Bridge Loan Capital, which morphed into something called Bridge Investment Group, which ended up with over 4,000 employees when I retired and billions of dollars under management. At the time when I retired, we had just under 20 billion. Now it's almost 50 billion. Now I'm still an owner. I'm still a founder. I still get checks, but I got 4,000 employees that were way smarter than me that could run it so that I could focus full time on philanthropy. And but some of the keys to success were not only that 6 inches between your ears, but a visualization of where you want to be. John, my partner.
Tell us more. Now, this is like, I want to hear about it.
John jokes a lot. He's like, yeah, people say, well, did you see it? He goes, no, but Paul did. He tells stories about how we were in an office so small that we would bump elbows when we turned around. And we'd have a deal where we needed like $25,000 by Friday. And I'm like calling, trying to get, somebody to invest. And John tells a story about how I hung up the phone And I turned around, I put my little pinky by my mouth like this, like Austin Powers, and I said, John, we're gonna be $1 billion fund someday like this. And he's like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday, right? Just being able to see that was hard for a lot of people. But then we talked about afterwards that night, I remember he said, Paul, he says, you know that neither one of us have the credibility, the background, the pedigree to run a multi-billion-dollar fund. I mean, I'm a University of Utah dropout, right? I don't have a JD MBA from Harvard, whatever. He goes, yeah, he said, but if we build it right, if we build it with integrity from the beginning, then we will create something that will just attract all of the right people into our life. Now, that visualization of where we want to go is so important. Let me tell you a quick story. You're going to love this one. So, years ago, my first marriage, I'm collecting ex-wives, not anymore though. Right?
Good to know.
Fix that problem. But my first wife, when we first got married, she was a model for McCarty's. They do the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated. She was a dancer on the University of Utah dance team and stuff. And she was just over 100 pounds, 5'8", but just super, just petite. About 2 months, and this is a month before we got married, just a few months before I was going to take the MCAT to go into medicine, we got in a major car accident.
Oh, wow.
I severed all the tendons in my hand, and I still have the freeway sitting in here from 30 years ago. And I was a concert pianist, putting myself through school, and I couldn't play the piano. In fact, these two fingers are on the same tendon. I can't.
I feel like the more we unlayer your story, the more questions. Concert pianist? Like,
I was playing in like events and stuff, and I was putting myself through school.
Incredible.
And I wanted to be a surgeon. But this one accident severed the tendons in my hand. They didn't know if I could be a doctor, be a surgeon. They says, well, you might not have the dexterity to be a surgeon, but you can be a regular doctor. And I'm like, I don't want to be a regular anything. You know, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a surgeon, not a regular surgeon, a heart surgeon, not a regular heart surgeon, but a pediatric cardiologist, one that specializes in helping kids, right? That's what I wanted to do. And so if I can't be the best, if I can't do that, I said, if my role in life is to be a garbage man, then I'm going to own the dump. That's just how I think, you know. I'm not going to just play small on anything. So changed my major to business and finance, and that's where I went that way. But back to the story of my wife at the time. She was petite, she was beautiful, still is beautiful, but she broke her pelvic bone in that accident, started gaining weight.
Oh, wow.
She couldn't exercise at all. Then she got pregnant with twins. Then she got pregnant with our third little boy. She went over 200 pounds. She was 230 pounds, mother of three, living in Utah. She was 29 years old, and I had sold my company a few years before, and I was speaking to young entrepreneurs and young business owners, and I told them, listen, you can be, do, have anything that you want. All you have to do is dream it. All you have to do is believe it. If time and money were no issue and you knew you couldn't fail, what would you dream? And that's why I was asking these young entrepreneurs. Well, we were driving home from that event, and Tiffany said to me, my wife, she said, Paul, I want to do something great with my life. I said, what do you want to do? I said, if I told her the same as these entrepreneurs. I said, if time and money is no issue and you knew you couldn't fail, what would you dream? She said, you're going to laugh at me. I said, I will not. She said, since I was a little girl, I wanted to be an NFL cheerleader. Now I look at my 230-pound wife, I'm like, you go, girl, right? And I realized she was serious. She said, when I was 14 years old, I danced at a halftime game at a 49ers game. And I remember seeing these girls, and they were up there, and I thought that would be so cool to be a San Francisco 49ers cheerleader. Now, understanding the importance of visualization. This was in December, so a few weeks later was Christmas. And I went online and I found a 49ers Gold Rush cheerleader who had hair like Tiffany, but of course her face and her body were different. And I did Adobe Photoshop and I put Tiffany's face on there. And I put at the bottom, Tiffany Hutchinson, San Francisco 49ers Gold Rush cheerleader. And I framed it and I gave it to her for Christmas. She opened it up and she started crying. And she put it on her bedstand. And every single night before she went to bed, she grabbed that picture and visualized that being her. Every single morning before she got out of bed, she grabbed that picture and she visualized that being her. It motivated her to start exercising. She exercised 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day for the next year. with no surgery at all, just her determination, she went from 230 pounds to just over 100 pounds.
Wow.
Now, 500 girls trying out for the 49er cheerleader that year. 3 spots available. She was the first pick.
Incredible.
Inside Edition did a whole piece on her, called it Tiffany's Triumph. You can look it up online. You can type in Tiffany Hutchinson 49ers cheerleader. You'll see me, 20 years ago with, my little kids and stuff there with her. But they did a whole piece on her of this going from 230 pounds to that. But it was all around that visualization. You can literally be, do, and have anything that you can dream. You can invest in a movie and create a global awareness to fix child trafficking if that's really what your dream is. Whatever it is, there's literally nothing that we can't accomplish. There's nothing that you can't do if you just have that unwavering faith, that unwavering belief, and do the work to create it.
We should get a little bit more technical. How much in detail do you go when you visualize, and do you have any daily rituals?
A lot of guys are like, oh, I'd love to have a Ferrari someday. So I ask them, I said, can you tell the difference between a Ferrari engine and a Lambo engine? If you can't, then you don't want a Ferrari. You have to touch it and smell it and feel it and have it everything a part of your being, as if you are there. In fact, have it so much that you actually experience gratitude for it before it even happens. Gratitude for the things that you're creating is the purest form of faith. In fact, I created, finally, after 50 years, I finally created the woman of my dreams, right? I was going through all of this crap in my life, and Tony Robbins called me a number of years ago. And he said, Tony had followed some of the work that we had done in the child rescue work, et cetera. And he was having a Unleash the Power, a UPW event, right? 10, 15,000 people showing up. And we talked about how I knew a guy by the name of Glenn Beck, and Glenn was a huge influencer. 50 million people were following him on his podcast and everything. And he said it'd be really cool if we could have Glenn come, and I'll put you guys right in the very front. I'm cool. So I call up Glenn. We take him there. We're there, very, very, very front row. Now, my wife at the time, understand this. This was now a few months after I had done my first plant medicine retreat, right? Everything had changed about how I saw myself, what I wanted to do with my life. And my wife at the time was still in that energy. Well, she liked extra girls at the house. She liked that kind of energy. And I was moving away from that. I was like, no, I want a healthy relationship. I want one where we're not fighting all the time. Tony has this part of his UPW event where he has you identify something in your business or your life that's not where you want it to be. And he has you write down in detail. It's like 2 hours worth of writing down everything, how it feels, how it smells, like in a positive present format. I am, I do, I achieve, all of this stuff as if you were already there. I am grateful for this happening in my life, etc. And I realized that I had used these techniques to build a multi-billion-dollar company. I had used these techniques to build a foundation, the Child Rescue Foundation, the Child Liberation Foundation, but I had never used these techniques in creating a healthy relationship in my life. So I wrote down, my dream is to have a healthy relationship with Rocio. And this is how Rocio is going to show up in my life. And this is how I show up in her life. And this is how she treats my kids. And this is how I treat her kids. And this is how our intimacy is. And this is how, all of these details about what I wanted this relationship to be like. And then I felt this overwhelming feeling that said, Paul, you can create anything you want, but you can't affect the free will of another person. And that was huge. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. Well then, so I changed it to my relationship with the woman in my life. This is how the woman in my life shows up for me. This is how I show up for her. This is how we treat each other in public. This is our devotion to each other. All of these details, right? That, and Tony takes you where you can just emotionally feel it and you're so grateful for it, and then he takes it away as if you're not there, and you can smell it and touch it and feel it and everything is there. That, I decided that's what I wanted. And whoever showed up in my life to be that person, if it was her, beautiful. If it wasn't, that's okay too, right? That very night, I found out some things. that made me text my attorney and say, look, we're done. You need to put together divorce papers. She had disappeared for a few hours, was out with some dude and went to his room and all kinds of stuff, right? And I was like, done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And now here's the thing. God knew I wasn't happy, but I was never specific on what I wanted. And the second that I decided and wrote down and felt it exactly what I wanted, I was shown, look, it's not her, right? So less than 2 months later, we filed for divorce. Less than 2 months later, I'm in Haiti. Sadly, I was at a funeral for one of my undercover operators named Jim, and I talk about that in the Sound of Freedom book. I had done 12 undercover missions in Haiti. We had taken down the largest child trafficking rings in the Caribbean. It was my last time there, and I'm in line at the airport. I turn around and there's this beautiful Colombian actress. I'm like, meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when she's donating her time at an orphanage in Haiti, that's really cool.
You manifested that.
Exactly. And every single thing on that list, everything she was, everything that I wanted, that I threw out there into the universe and said, God, please bring this into my life. Everything showed up that day. And so I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatever it is, you can literally create. In fact, here's my favorite story. This is funny, okay?
I love it. You're full of stories.
This is a fun one.
Incredible.
Do you know who Henry Cavill is?
Yes.
Henry Cavill.
Who doesn't know Henry
Yeah, Henry
Cavill?
Cavill is the actor who plays Superman. I mean, super chiseled, whatever. So Henry, my wife's name now is Ada Vanessa. H-A-D-A means fairy in Spanish, Ada Vanessa. So Henry was at her work almost every day for about 2 or 3 months.
Was he a Superman at that time?
No, it was actually, it was, I don't know what the timing was. When did Superman come out? Yeah, so this was in New York years ago. So I think it was right before he got big with Superman. So he was at her work almost every day. They started to date. Nothing big in public, right? They went on like 3 dates is all. And then she met me. I stole Superman's girlfriend. That's my mic drop.
That's a mic drop for sure.
Yeah, she was funny. In her phone, she had his name in there as Henry Cavill, my future husband. I changed it to Henry Cavill, the fake Superman.
You're the real Superman for her now.
Says. But it's really all about just visualizing what you want and feeling it here, and you can create whatever it is that you dream. You literally are co-creating with God, with divinity, with the universe. Everything all comes into play. There's a book called The Science of Getting Rich. This is over 100 years old.
Taking notes.
You should write this one down. So this one of all of the self-help programs that are out there, all of the visualization and create your vision boards. And back in the years ago, they had this TV or this movie called The Secret, right? And all of those guys, if you follow the genealogy of them, where they all started getting their mindset, it started with a company called the Nightingale Conan Corporation. And before that, Nightingale Conan started with him reading a little green book called The Science of Getting Rich. And it talks about how if you change how you think and you visualize and you believe it, you literally are pulling together the forces of the universe to create that thing which is in your thoughts.
And another incredible thing you've said, and which a lot of people maybe hesitate to do, is giving back. And you said if you want to be a millionaire, create $1 million of value in lives of others.
Exactly.
So can you also speak to more about giving back, and how can we in today's world create that value in other people's?
So that's such a good question. So, the Sound of Freedom book is coming out July 29th. My next one that I'm almost done with is called Infinite Abundance, the Golden Age of Conscious Capitalism. And it talks about how we think that we live in this world of scarcity, but indeed we live in a world of abundance. And it teaches principles of what I call multipliers. And one of the multipliers is charity work that I talk about. So whether somebody is a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, if any of them that believe in the Old Testament, there's a book there called the Book of Malachi, the very last book, and it says, God's talking and says, prove me now herewith if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out blessings that there will not even be room enough to receive it. He's talking about charity work. He's talking about not 1 or 2%, but at least 10% of your income, a minimum of 10% going to bless the lives of others, going to charity, to helping those who are more in need, right? Doing that is as a multiplier. We all have 24 hours in our day, right? So if you put in time for money, for things, you're going to do it forever. But if you can figure out how to multiply your efforts, either by building the right team, being able to co-create in this way, I believe that donation of that 10% creates a 10x multiple on your efforts with everything else you're doing. And I have hundreds of examples. One time I was flying to, we got this request again from this Glenn Beck who wanted to launch his anti-child trafficking campaign from Bangkok, Thailand. And it was going to cost $100,000 to take him and his team there and everything else. And that the foundation we were working with at the time was kind of new. It had a bunch of grandmas that were donating $25 a month to help save kids. That was kind of sacred money. So I decided I would just fund that. So myself, my business partner, Don, we flew with him to Thailand, filmed all these kids that were in the orphanages and some of the trafficking going on there. Then we flew back. As we touched down into the US, and I had signal on my phone, I had 2 voicemail messages that popped up. One of them was from one of the owners of the largest hotel chains in the world. He said, Paul, I've been looking at your numbers. I want to put another $10 million into your senior housing fund. Another one was from one of the owners of one of the largest gas station chains in the US with even a bigger number. And my income from those 2 voicemail messages, multiples, exceeded what I just put out into charity. I tell people I'm not that charitable. I just need help running my companies, and God does a better job. And so I just I do this work, and so it's a beautiful trade-off energetically that we can create massive value in the lives of other people. And what you were known on as well. You want to make $1 million, create $1 million worth of value in the lives of others. You want to make $1 billion, create $1 billion worth of value in the lives of others and expect that return coming back to you as part of it. And it's okay. It's okay. And you can do it. You can do it without, see, if you believe that we live in a zero-sum world, if you believe that in order for you to make $10 million, that other people have to have $10 million coming out of their pockets, then good people, you're going to sabotage your own success because of your misunderstanding of the world of economics.
Which is also mind of scarcity.
Exactly. My first chapter in my Conscious Capitalism book is Scarcity versus Abundance. Your economics teacher lied to you. Because the very definition of economics is the division of scarce resources, which is a fallacy. We have enough resources where every one of us could have all the food we could ever eat, all the cars we could ever drive. All of this stuff is massive abundance everywhere. We think that we live in a zero-sum world. We think that we live in a world of scarcity. And because of that, we do things to hurt other people to try to get ahead. Where in reality, we can get ahead while creating positive value for everyone around us.
And how can that mindset consciously or subconsciously sabotage your financial success?
Well, because let's say that you're a good person. I'm a good person, you're a good person. I believe that you're a good person. I can feel energy, right?
Thank you.
You've got a beautiful, good heart, okay? And would you go out on the street and just take $100 from some bum on the street, take it away from him? Would you? You would never hurt somebody to gain money for yourself, right? There's nothing in you that would harm another person and take from them. So if you believe that the only way that you're going to make $10 million is for other people to not have that 10 million, subconsciously you're going to say, no, I'd rather stay broke. I'd rather stay where I am. I'd rather not try to get ahead because I don't want that disparagement. But if you understand that, no, it's not that way at all, that you can literally create here and bring up here all at the same time. And I talk about that in detail in that book. about how we can create infinite abundance for ourselves and for everyone around us in this golden age of conscious capitalism.
And can you remind us the name of the book again?
I'm still working on the name. It's either going to be called Infinite Wealth or Infinite Abundance, something like that is the main name, just 2 words there. But the subline on it is going to be the golden age of conscious capitalism or compassionate capitalism. Either way, I have it written already. I've got 12 chapters. I have 2 more chapters and I'm done with it. And I'm super excited because I think it feeds into everything. Even child trafficking, even all the toxicity of our world, it comes from how we energetically see each other and everything else. If we see each other as anything other than the divine feminine, the divine masculine in each person, if we see them as unequal to us because of our financial condition or because of our race or religion or our gender or anything, if we see any kinds of divisions, that's what's creating some of the challenges. If I start judging and judging somebody for the car they drive or their color of their skin or anything, anytime I'm judging another person, even judging somebody for being a heroin addict, I don't know where that came from. All of these things, this disparagement that's creating so many problems, and it comes to economics as well. If we think that the only way to get ahead is to take rather than getting ahead by giving, then it's going to create a world where we're always in friction with each other.
And how can we stay grounded with our integrity as we're, let's say, scaling up or growing our business or gaining, more financial success? How can people stay more grounded?
Let's put it this way. So there's a lot of people that pray, right? We all pray. Not we all, but some people pray. But how do most people pray? They're like, praise, praise, praise. God is great. God is good. God is great. God is good, right? Praise, praise, praise. And then, sorry. Please forgive me. I had this bad thought. I thought about, whatever it is. I did these bad things. And fix, right? Can you please bless me in this way and bless me in this way? And then they hang up the phone. They turn around. They don't have a healthy conversation. They don't ever listen, right? I've got another book I'm working on called Are You Listening? With My Hand on My Heart. So we'll talk about that. So can you imagine having a relationship? Let's say that somebody was wanting to date you, right? And they called you up and they had that conversation. Praise, praise, praise. Wow, you are so beautiful. You're so amazing. I love everything. You're just how you walk, how you talk, everything is just amazing. And by the way, sorry. I left my socks out. I crashed the car. I cheated on you. Sorry. Fix. Hey, by the way, can you when you get home, can you fix this and put this away, whatever? And then they hang up the phone.
That's not going to work.
It's not going to work. That's not a relationship. That's how most people have a relationship with God. So the reason I set that up is this. A lot of people think that the Eastern meditation is different from Western Christianity and prayer. No. Meditation is tuning in. It is listening, right? And it can be the same thing. So many people don't ever receive that divine guidance in their life. They don't ever turn off their rational mind long enough to be able to tune in to that still small voice. In my book, Are You Listening? I talk about how on the undercover missions, it wasn't just following logic and protocol. It was being led. I believe that God looks down at what's happening with us adults. He says, you adults do whatever you want. You want to be a cheerleader, great. You want to be a billionaire, great. Whatever it is, that's great, I think God sees what's happening with these children and says, no way. If I've got good people willing to do something, I'm gonna pave the way. And in doing so, I saw more miracles in that work than I did in any time in my life, because I could have that unwavering conviction and I could tune in to that still small voice of truth, that quiet whisper that every one of us are born with, every one of us have access to, but very few people tune into because we're so busy in our conscious mind thinking about what we want to do and what we want to create and our ego space that we don't take that time to tune in. And so taking time every single day to tune in, to listen, to meditate has completely transformed my life, the direction that I am able to, and the receiving of direction every single day. So that's what I would say is learn to meditate. We teach at our retreats. We go through meditation every single day, different types of meditation, transcendental, active meditation, quiet meditation, in getting really deep into a full theta state and receiving connection meditation. We teach breath work, a lot of different types of breath work, etc. Together, all of that together with the different types of plant medicines is incredibly transformational.
I love that. That sounds very exciting because I love yoga, I love meditation, breath work, all of that, and everything you said sounds incredible. For people who have not built wealth yet and they want to be this good person and they want to give back, what does giving back look like beyond money? How can they give back?
Well, it's interesting. You know, when I very first was getting started, I was earning like $2,000 a month, right? And my mentor said, Paul, the average person gives about 2% of their annual income to charity, you know. 2% of a couple thousand, that doesn't hurt very much, right? That's maybe $40 a month. He said, if you make the decision today that number is going to be 10% of your money and 10% of your time, that's where the real magic happens. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's why I wanted to become wealthy, is so that I can, after I'm rich, then I'm going to donate my money, then I'm going to donate my time. He said, no. He said, do it now. Do it now. When you're earning $2,000 a month, and donate not just 10%, maybe upwards of 20%. I mean, that's like $400 a month. Now I have to live on $1,600 and give away 10% of my time, meaning if I'm working a 40-hour week, I have to donate 4 hours a week of time to charity. That's a lot of time. But when you get actively involved in your charitable pursuits, not just giving money to the homeless shelter, but going down there and serving in the soup line, looking them in the eyes, feeling their hearts, understanding their stories, connecting with them from a pure humanity standpoint, understanding that you're not better than them. We're all equals. We're all in a different situation, in different places in our life, in our own creation, based on what he believes and what he's creating, what I am, etc. It doesn't make him a bad person, right? And so in that space, I can truly connect with those people that we're helping, and that's what happened with the charity work as well. When I was invited to not just fund a child rescue mission, but to physically go undercover and be there and see those kids, that changed everything for me.
And you are the executive producer of Sound of Freedom and the upcoming book Sound of Freedom, which also revolves around anti-sex trafficking. Can you tell us more about that story? And first of all, how did you get into all of this? Because before this, Paul was managing a $40 billion real estate fund and a wildly successful business. So what's your journey getting into trafficking?
Well, first of all,
anti-trafficking.
There's a lot of executive producers. I'm the primary investor and the first executive producer in the movie Sound of Freedom. In fact, the producer, Eduardo Verástegui, who the Latin actor in the movie, who's the producer, he plays Pablo. That's me in real life. He plays the part of the multi-billion-dollar real estate fund manager who quits his job to go help rescue the kids. The truth is, we took a number of different rescue missions and put them all together into that film, together with a lot of different stories from different operators, different operations, etc., with just a handful of actors. But my story starts more than 10 years ago. I received a phone call that changed my life. I was already helping to fund some rescue missions. I was very involved in child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors in our area, which helps children with life-threatening illnesses, cancer and stuff like that. It gives them grant streams to them. Beautiful organization. I was helping to fund some of these missions, and I got a phone call from one of the operators. And he said, Paul, I'm in Cartagena, Colombia. He said, we thought there was 20 kids here. There's more than 50, more than 100 in some other cities. And he had a plan that he wanted to rescue all 100 kids at the same time. He said, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? I thought ego me at the time was like, I'll write you a check. And he said, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days? The plan was that the head trafficker had a piece of property that he wanted to, he had this plan of creating a child brothel resort type of a thing. He needed a few $1 million to build it out, and he had connections with all the other traffickers in the area. And somehow we needed to get him to call them and bring all the kids to the same place at the same time. So what the plan was is I would tell him, hey, I'm willing to fund your project under one condition. We're gonna have a party. I'm gonna show up, a bunch of my friends. You show up with all of the kids that you have. If I'm happy with what I see, I'll fund your project. And so that's what the plan was. 2 days later, I'm face to face with the most evil people you can imagine. The thing that changed my life, understand this, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul effing Hutchinson, right? I mean, I had this incredible lifestyle. At one point I had 2 helicopters and a plane, and my house had 10 bathrooms and 8 private suites and a basketball court in my basement. It was, ego. And I was having parties every other weekend with 150 of the most beautiful women you can imagine, with all the NBA players and the NFL players there at my house. And that was the life I was living at the time. I wasn't doing anything bad other than, I guess morally, in that space. But on that mission, when I was sitting down on a chair and these traffickers bring out some of these kids, and one of them was a little girl. She was 11. They said, this is a 0 kilometer mile model.
Oh my gosh, that's so disgusting.
It's disgusting. Just talking about them like commodities, right? And I was looking into her face, and her makeup was all smeared because she had been crying. She was so scared of meeting me. She was thinking that this was the man who was going to take her innocence away. And I'm sitting on a chair just like this. She's standing up, and we're almost eye level, just like you and I are right now. And I took her little hands, and she was shaking. And I just said, it's it's okay. I couldn't believe that this was okay anywhere in the world. That a child, an innocent 11-year-old child, her innocence was being sold to a stranger. And as I looked into her eyes, I made a promise to myself, to her, to God, that I was going to dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. I couldn't imagine anything worse. And the most beautiful moment for me was after the agents came and stormed the party, and the Child Protective Services people were there, and they were in there with the kids. There was about 30 of them in there with the kids. And because of how scared a lot of these kids were, they were trying to calm them down. And so they started laughing, they started singing with these children. And that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. So that's why the book is called The Sound of Freedom. That's why the movie was. And I turned to the operator that was with me, and I said, bro, I spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. What do you need? And he said, Paul, there's a huge part of the demand for this that comes from wealthy guys with, big checkbooks and big egos, and they kind of look and dress and talk like you. He said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. So that was the beginning. I led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions in over 15 countries for a period of 10 years. And I saw the darkest that humanity has to offer. But I also saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And after 10 years of doing this work, I realized that every time we pulled these kids out of hell, there was more kids that were being pulled back in. To fill a demand, I realized that we were just fighting fire with fire. And when you're fighting fire with fire, something already got burned, right? And in this case, it's children. And so I thought, the only solution here isn't just pulling the kids out. The only solution is healing humanity. We together can save hundreds of millions, billions of children in the future by taking a step back and saying, what do we need to do to change our lives so that we can keep our kids safe, so that we can spread positive energy instead of the negative. I realize that most of these traffickers were filled with arrogance and greed and lust, and they had addictions and all of this stuff that I saw in every other area of life as well. And I had to look in the mirror and I had to say, Paul, how has arrogance and greed and lust showed up in your life? And what do you need to do to fix that? To start making a positive impact in the world around you, not just with what you're doing in rescuing the kids.
And what have you noticed, the thing that you should do?
It's a thing for everybody. Right? I love this story. This man's like sitting on a couch, right? And his little boy walks in and says, Daddy, I want to play baseball with you. And the dad's like, no, I'm busy right now. I'm reading the newspaper. So pretty soon the little boy comes back in and says, Dad, please, let's play baseball. And the dad's like, no, I'm busy. And he turns the page and there's a map of the world, a whole map of the world there. And he tears out that page and he tears it up in little pieces of paper and he throws it on the ground. And he says, son, you need to learn your geography. Why don't you go get some tape all that. You tape every single country exactly where it's supposed to be. You do all of that, and then if you do it perfectly, I'll go out and play baseball with you. He goes back to reading his newspaper. Well, he's thinking it's going to take hours, right? Like 5 minutes later, the little boy comes back and it's taped perfectly. And the man's like, oh, how'd you do that? And the little boy turns over the newspaper and he says, well, there was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together and the whole world came together. And that's really the answer. That's the answer to all of this. We can go out there and try to fix this and fix this and fix this, and we don't ever take a look at the person inside. We don't take a look at that person in the mirror. I'll call this tension transfer. So imagine that, I go to work, I'm out of integrity, I'm filled with anger, I yell at one of my employees, and that employee goes home and he yells at his wife, and the wife yells at the son when the son comes home from school, and then the son kicks the dog, right? Literally, that dog being kicked was a transfer of the tension that I started, right? It was the ripple effect of the things that I did. Now, most people, I'm hoping that nobody that's watching this podcast is ever, or listening to this podcast, has ever hurt a child and ever would. However, all of us have to take a look inside and say, how has that transfer, how has the ripple effect made a difference, positive or negative, in the lives of others? Now let's just pretend. Let's pretend like I go to work and I'm out of integrity and I'm yelling, I've got anger issues, and I yell at that same employee. But what I didn't realize is that employee, when he was a child, was abused. Physically, verbally, sexually abused as a child. Let's say that he made a lot of bad decisions growing up and turned to drugs, turned to pornography. And let's say that his pornography addiction had escalated to the point where he was looking at rape videos, he was looking at bestiality. Maybe he's starting to look at younger and younger just to satisfy this insatiable void that he's trying to fill. And let's say that he's been getting drunk on alcohol and his wife just left him. And let's say that this weekend is the weekend that his 12-year-old daughter gets to stay with him, and she's bringing her little cousin with her. Now, me being out of integrity. Now me speaking with anger to him. Now that tension transfer, as he goes home and he gets drunk and he crosses that line. Now a child is hurt because I didn't fix my shit. So all of us, even if we're not, hurting somebody directly, we all have to take a look at what's inside. What do we need to do to show up differently in the world? And for me at the time, I was living a hedonistic lifestyle. I was having multiple women multiple times a day. I was in the very second that you look at a woman, take her from the divine feminine that she is to an object, you start going down a dark road, right? And so as we all, and guys who are watching this right now, 90% of you, 90% of you guys have had in the last couple years or currently today have had a problem with addiction, either addiction to alcohol or most of them, it's an addiction to pornography. And that pornography, that lust, that taking the woman from a divine feminine to that object is something that is feeding into the negativity that is contributing to things like child abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse, and child trafficking. So there's a long answer.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. It's very thought-provoking, and Sound of Freedom actually portrays a story about a child being sex trafficked, but the movie made such an impact to a level that there were legislative changes that were made. Can you tell us more about when you first realized this movie was more than just entertainment, but it was catalyst for action, and what was the reason of this wild success for Sound of Freedom?
Well, I will say this. I never invested in the movie with the hopes of wild financial success. It was never that intention. From the beginning, we knew that we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen. It was too dangerous and undercover work. But we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. And so we took the story to Sony, Lionsgate, Paramount, and they were interested in the film, but they wanted to have full literary control. They could literally have rewritten anything they wanted, put some of my operators in a position, the precarious position with the kids, whatever it was, right? They could have changed it to their own narrative. And we thought, no, we need to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the stories and so I was the primary investor. I put the first money in the film, and then we brought some other families on to help. And then after we finished it, though, we got cut off at the knees. We were stopped by Hollywood and big media. It took us 5 years before we were able to get any distribution. We were turned down. We were turned down by Netflix. I mean, Netflix, they put out a TV series called Cuties, right? A bunch of 10-year-olds dressed as strippers, yet they turned down Sound of Freedom. It should tell you what their agenda is, the solid values that they're trying to take away from us and our families and trying to take us down this road, right? And so moving forward, the movie was literally dead. It was dead in the water. Nothing was moving forward. And gratefully, there was a company named Angel Studios who had a very conservative audience already. They had put together a TV series called The Chosen, and so they had a lot of people that were good family-oriented followers already. And so I like to say that Sound of Freedom was brought to the people by the people. This wasn't just Hollywood and big money there. This was people like me who had never invested in film before. I'm a real estate investor. The best way to lose your money is to put it in film, right? And so I wouldn't have put it there just as a great return, but we only spent about $14 million on the film. Yet over 70 million people saw Sound of Freedom, and hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of it. And in addition to that, as you said earlier, we've been able to help change laws and policies everywhere. There's countries everywhere that before they were not wanting to make any changes, major changes. Now with the success of the movie, there are people that are rising up and saying, yes, this is what we want. And I'm able to go in, our team is able to go in. We've helped to change laws and policies in many countries. We have certification programs where people in healthcare, doctors, or people in hospitality and hotels and whatnot are certified to know what to look for when it comes to trafficking. We have educational programs in the schools where teachers can identify children who are at risk or being trafficked or whatnot in their own schools as well. Things for parents, educational things as well. So literally, we have helped millions and millions of children be in a safer place today than we ever were just leading undercover missions and pulling them out of hell.
As you said, after 5 years of stillness, I'll say, what made the movie catch fire?
It was all a grassroots movement of good conservative people who were all part of the Angel Studios audience, who were like, yeah, we want this, we want to promote this. And so there was nothing. You didn't see anything on mainstream media at all. It was crickets. Even when we beat out Mission Impossible in the box office, even when we beat out Indiana Jones, all of these, we were just blowing up. None of the mainstream media even talked about it. The only reason you were hearing about it is that good people were sharing the story with other good people and saying, hey, we want to create a movement here. And that's exactly what happened. And so it just ripple effect. Again, it was brought to the people by the people.
And now you have a book coming out.
Yes.
How is it different than the movie, and when is it coming out?
So July 29th. So just this next month, The Sound of Freedom. So the movie is Sound of Freedom. This is The Sound of Freedom. And it's the something is the true stories that inspired the film. And there's a lot of difference. So a lot of times people will leave Sound of Freedom movie and they'll be mad and want to do something, but there's no real actionable things that parents can do. In the book, it's filled not only with the stories of the details on the missions themselves that take you through the same emotional transformation that I went through and other operators, but in addition to that, it's filled with tools that parents can use to keep their kids safe. The whole first section is the making of an undercover operator. And in that section talks about situational awareness and reading the room and understanding the signs and what to look for. All of these things that we had to learn to be able to be in those positions to help rescue the kids. And then there's the number of their different rescue missions that are included in the book. And then the end of it, the whole last 5 or 6 chapters of it is all about liberating humanity. What do we need to do individually to make sure that our kids, our grandkids, our great-great-grandkids don't end up in a world where there's 10, 12 plus million children being sold? There's more people in slavery today than all 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade put together. And so we need to wake up. We need to say, no, this is not going to happen, not moving forward. We have evolved as humanity to the point where this is not okay ever. You know, most religions believe that we're coming into a time of turmoil and then there's going to be 1,000 years of peace and God comes. They kind of got that right. But God's not going to come and just slip his fingers and have us all be nice to each other, right? We've got to start changing how we interact with each other. We've got to change how we're holding on to our anger and our fear and our judgment and all these things that are creating this toxicity in our lives, that are contributing to our addictions, contributing to the abuse of others. All of these things are things that we individually have to start changing in order for the world to be ready for that 1,000 years of peace.
It's not just about saving the survivors of trafficking, but also ending the demand, right?
Exactly. And that's what it's about. You know, it's how do we end the demand? Well, we remove all of the things, we heal all the things that are creating it. I mean, somebody doesn't just grow up and all of a sudden at 45 years old decide to go to Colombia and go rape children. It's already a lot of negativity they've been holding on to for a long time. They're probably already abusing kids in their own home or their own neighborhood here in the US, etc. And so it's not just saving that child in Colombia, it's saving all of those kids along the way. How do we do that? We start out with that guy before he ever crosses the line, before he ever hurts a child. And sit down with him at that point and say, what is going on in your life that makes you think that it's okay for you to cross that line and hurt a child? If we had a time machine, we could save all these kids before they're ever abused in the first place. But we don't have that. What we do have is hundreds of millions of adults who are holding on to trauma of their own childhood, of their own past, that need tools to be able to release that. So that's what we focus on.
Because a lot of people and parents get overwhelmed because it's such a big topic. What can I do as an individual in my daily life, or as a parent? What can I do to make a change, but also to protect my child? And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
what are some of the things that they can do?
Well, a lot of people leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they're like, oh, I want to do something, you know, I want to go help rescue kids. So you know, the worst thing you can go do is you go to Mexico and try to go undercover, right? You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how does that help? I'm going to, you know, stop trafficking that way. Yeah, you will, because here's the thing. The majority of children who are being sold for these horrible things. The majority of them don't get taken from a healthy home and get taken out into a container ship and taken to another country. The majority of those children actually sleep in their own beds at night and their parents don't know, right? Or if they are taken, they're taken from either runaways or broken families, a broken foster care program where these kids are at risk. And so the more that we can do to keep our families together, the safer our kids will be. In fact, we need the biggest dangers for our kids is not going to Mexico and getting taken. The biggest dangers for our children isn't some guy in a black alley. The biggest dangers is actually in their backpack and in their pocket. It's on their phones. It's the digital age wherein these predators are pretending to be a 13-year-old, or pretending and talking to your daughter, talking to your son, and pretending like they are somebody their same age, and get them to send some inappropriate pictures to them. And then they use what they call extortion or sextortion, right? Where they say, hey, we're going to use this, send it all over your school unless you do these other things, unless you send us more pictures, unless you meet us here. These are super dangerous. And the number of people in our own families and our own neighborhoods who are broken, who will cross that line with your kids, is higher than people think. Literally more than half of all women that you know have been a victim of sexual abuse at some time in their life. 1/4 of all women, it was as a child, in their own homes, many of them. And so we need a relationship with our kids where they can very easily, very comfortably come to you and say, hey mama, hey dad, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because he touches us weird, or he tells us we should have secrets outside of you, or I don't like going to this babysitter house because she's showing us pornography, she says that we should trust her more than you, or I don't like this friend's house because her brother took pictures of us when we're changing, now he's gonna send them all over the school if we don't do these things. These are all grooming behaviors, and we as parents can step in, and you need to have a relationship with your kids where you are their 911. You're the one they call if they mess up on something or something bad happens, if somebody's trying to extort them, and have healthy conversations with them where these things aren't going to progress to the point where they're a victim.
There are a lot of misconceptions around trafficking. What are some of the most interesting misconceptions that you observed while you went undercover on child rescue?
Like you said, a lot of people think that trafficking is all happening in Thailand or Mexico or Colombia. No, it's right here. The number one producer and consumer of child pornography is the United States of America. There's more people here that are doing these horrible things percentage-wise than anywhere. And so there's trafficking happening right underneath our noses. And again, one of those misperceptions is the kids are taken to another country. No, these are kids that sometimes their parents don't even know that it's happening. We had some operations where we had it was a little girl in Acapulco who, she was living at home, yet she was being babysat by her aunt. Her aunt was showing her pornography. Her aunt was working with the traffickers. Her aunt was the one that got her involved in these trafficking rings. The mother had no idea that it was even happening. And so it's so important that you know who's babysitting your kids. It's so important that you know what houses they're spending overnights at. And it's so important that you have healthy relationships with them where they can come to you and tell you when something's not feeling right.
And what are some signs that we can recognize in our daily lives if somebody's trafficked, whether it's our own family member or maybe a stranger?
Well, if your 13-year-old daughter was really, really outgoing, and now all of a sudden she's kind of to herself, and she's turning into more of a recluse, if that happens, a lot of people think, oh, she's just going through, puberty. No, that's the age. The average age of a child that is brought into paid sexual prostitution, the average age is 12. And so that's the age you need to be watching when these young kids are going through puberty and you're thinking, oh, that's just puberty thing. No, there's a likely chance that some very scary things are happening in that child's life. And, we work with, I'm the founder of the Child Liberation Foundation, and we help fund other foundations who are actively working in fighting child trafficking, and one of them is called Love Justice, and they have entire teams around the world that are trained in high-risk areas to identify trafficking. They're on borders of different countries in the Middle East and Latin America, etc., and they are watching for somebody who seems to have somewhat of a disconnect with an adult and a young child, usually that child between the ages of 8, maybe 10 and 14 years old, if they seem like they're under a certain degree of distress, if they're even people that don't have an adult with them, teenage girls that seem to be traveling alone. They say, okay, where are you going? Well, I have this job opportunity. Really, what is it? Oh, it's a modeling opportunity in Albania. Really, and do you know who they are? No, I don't know who they are. And do you have the information? No, I don't. No, I don't know. I don't. These are things that some of these predators will lure these girls, these children, into these horrific situations, even without somebody physically taking them or manipulating them in that way. It can all be done digitally.
And you're also hosting now some retreats in Colombia. Can you tell more about that?
I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent and tell you my real transformation and why those all came. And this is going to be a little bit of a surprise for some of the people listening, but it's important to understand because this is incredibly powerful. So back up just really briefly. In my early 20s, I started a company called Midwest Center. It helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. I built it up. I sold it at 29 years old for $20 million. Wow. So just as a kid, I had 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial to get help with anxiety and depression, PTSD, addictions, etc. Well, the program was a cognitive restructuring program. It helped people change the negative habit patterns of thought because the drug companies are making billions of dollars keeping us sick, just numbing our emotions with Xanax and Prozac and all of these things that aren't really getting down to the root of the problem. And for many people, the root of the problem is stuck in their subconscious mind. So when we're like 0 to 9 years old, our mind is in a state of neuroplasticity. We're very, very impressionable, right? So you can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time when you're 2 or 3 or 4 years old. At the same time that you're learning to walk and talk and all of these other things, right? It's because you've got that neuroplasticity, and all this stuff is just in your subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind drives 95% of our life. So our conscious mind is talking right now. Your subconscious mind is handling, like when you're driving down the street, your subconscious mind is usually driving. Why? Because even though we weren't in that state of neuroplasticity, after 9 or 10 years old, it takes about 21 days to create a new habit, right? And so if you imagine that our subconscious mind is like some concrete, right? And it's in its fluid form, it's movable, but then you don't smooth it out. And as a child, you got all these big bumps on your freeway and you're driving your life around this thing and it's big bumps. Well, you're like, okay, I've got to fix that. I've got to fix that habit. It's going to take 21 days to chisel that hardened concrete in order to change it. So keep that picture and then I'm going to come back to it, okay? So 10 years ago, 12 years ago, again, I'm not Paul Hutchinson, I'm Paul effing Hutchinson, right? I'm living this life of debauchery, and that's when I got that phone call to start doing undercover. The first thing that started my change was when I saw that child firsthand. And it changed my heart, and I thought, I am going to do whatever I can do to help fix this. So I continued undercover work. But the problem is that the reason I was so good at undercover is that the energy that the traffickers were looking for was arrogance and greed and lust, and I was filled with it, right? This is the life I was living. And so now I was rescuing kids. Now it fed into that ego. It fed into that. And now I had pardon my French, but I had the best panty dropper story on the planet, right? I was rescuing kids too. I'm like Batman, right? And so this was the kind of energy I was in. And then we were losing our undercover operators. I had guys that were, after 1 or 2 missions undercover, they couldn't deal with it anymore. There was way too much negativity. And so we were trying to figure out, because a lot of my operators were Navy SEALs, Green Berets, already had PTSD, and one undercover mission, seeing a menu with children, they were just done, right?
It's so dark.
It's so dark. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about some of this stuff. And so we're trying to find ways to help some of these guys with their PTSD. And I got a phone call from two of my operators, Andy and Jimmy. Andy had done 22 undercover missions with me. Jimmy had done 13. And they called me up and they said, "Paul, do you trust us?" I said, "Yeah, I trust you with my life. Undercover, I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die." They said, "You need to come to this healing retreat." I'm like, "I don't need to heal. I'm Paul F. and Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me." And they're like, "No, you're on your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Your kids don't talk to you. You think that you're going to be happy with one more girl, one more plane, one more car, one more whatever, and that's not going to make you happy. And you're just filled with this void." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I kind of trust you for that." They said, "Come to this thing, and it will be the most transformational experience of your life." I trusted them enough to go, and it changed everything. It was the most transformational experience by far. And here's what it is. Now, the listeners are going to be like, "Oh, wait a minute." This doctor had been traveling around the world and had identified some different plant medicines that were incredibly powerful at very quickly helping people break free of anxiety and depression, PTSD addictions within days, not months or years, right? 10 and 20 years worth of therapy done in 3 or 4 days. What she was using is she had what I'm going to say the proper use, and this is so important, the proper use of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy. Now, I thought when I first heard about it, I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't mushrooms, aren't those as dangerous as cocaine because they're Schedule 1 drugs, they're illegal? The truth is, psilocybin in mushrooms is safer. Not only is it dangerous, it's not dangerous like cocaine, it's safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction, never been a case of overdose. And when used correctly, what happens is this. It puts the subconscious mind in a state of neuroplasticity, just like when you were 0 to 9 years old, very, very impressionable. Okay, so what happens is like that concrete freeway that has all the bumps in it. What if you could wave a magic wand and turn it back into the flowing concrete so that you could smooth it out during that process? This is what happens in the experience of proper use of psychedelics, right? This is why it's very, very dangerous for it to be, and it's going to be legalized within the next couple of years. This is why it's important for people to start to understand this. I have never found anything that was more effective at helping adults heal from their own childhood sexual trauma, from their own childhood physical abuse, from their own anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions. I've never found anything more effective. And so in my first experience, what happened? The facilitator, knowing that I had this big ego problem and I was out of integrity with my words and my actions, etc., gave me a specific strain of psilocybin. There's about 180 different strains. Gave me a specific strain of it that was designed to kind of break things up. And then the music, also curated by Johns Hopkins University, the different frequencies, took me into this state where it was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. Horrific because I felt in every cell of my body, as if I was them, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom. And it was so hard. And it felt like a knife going through my chest. I felt like Satan had his foot on my chest and I was 600 miles in the dirt. I couldn't even breathe. And then the facilitator changed the playlist into this beautiful, I call it my Jesus list, right? It felt like God was just lifting me out of this pit of hell and this tar was coming off of me. And then I said to myself, "Paul, have you learned your lesson yet?" So we changed that playlist back to that drumbeat meditation one that took me down. And I went down on purpose so that I could feel the ripple effect of every action as if I was them. And I felt like the pain of the family that broke up because some guy was at my party and slept with a cheerleader and now his wife left him. And I felt that pain. And then I felt the ripple effect of that breaking up the family, thinking of the future where maybe the daughter ends because there's not a father in the home, and maybe the daughter gets raped, or maybe the son gets involved on drugs and whatever else. And literally the ripple effect of my actions, positive and negative, became as if I was those people. The joy of the kids that I helped to rescue was so beautiful. And that experience was so profound that I started studying on it. I became a master facilitator. My daughter became a shaman. She is studied all around the world in holistic therapy, in sound therapy, in plant therapy, in child trauma therapy. She wrote a lot of the child trauma therapy things that are used in the safe houses for the kids, with the art therapy we use there and the music therapy, etc. She also wrote the curriculum for the adults that are dealing with that stuff that we go through these transformational retreats. So that's a kind of a long answer, but it's important that people do the research on, the John Hopkins studies. A lot of our leaders in different countries are recognizing that the fact that they have been swept under the rug for the last 50 years has done us a disservice when it comes to mental health. And the proper use of these tools, and here's why it's so important when I say proper. You don't want to go into this state of neuroplasticity in the wrong environment. It's literally damaging to your subconscious mind in the wrong environment. But you have the right environment with people who love you, people who can create that right in container, come in with a clear intention. It's incredibly powerful. And that's what put me back on the right path of living a life of integrity and honor and not debauchery that was destroying people's lives.
And how can people find out more about your retreats?
All of my social media is just Liberating Humanity, just liberating.humanity on Instagram, everything else. I don't want it about Paul Hutchinson. I want it Liberating Humanity, because that's what it's about. And so you can go to liberatinghumanity.com and you can pre-order the Sound of Freedom book. You can get all kinds of information on the retreats themselves and what they are and what we offer, etc. There's a place there that people can put their email and phone number and whatnot, and we can have people get back in touch with them and let them know we're running these retreats in Costa Rica, in Peru, in Mexico, and Colombia. We can't do it in the US yet because we're working on changing the laws here, but soon they will be. And then we can do them here in the US.
How do you define success today, not in numbers, but in impact? And what makes you feel like you've succeeded in your mission?
I think that success is not a destination, it's a journey. And it's an ever-evolving journey. If we ever believe that we have arrived, then we're going to lose that energy, that excitement of creating, of building. So, when I was a kid, I had a poster on my wall, had a bunch of Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and I had a quote that says, "He who has the most toys wins," right? That's what my goal was. If I have the most toys, I win. I now have one that says, the person that has a powerful, positive impact in the most lives wins. I believe that's what it's about. And here's the thing, you don't have to be a big podcaster, you don't have to be a big public speaker, you don't have to be anything. Do you realize that if you spent an entire year working on yourself, becoming the best version of you possible, releasing all those things that don't serve you, stepping into the highest and best version of you, and then you spent the next year and you simply helped 2 people, just 2 people, release those things that don't serve them, release judgment and fear and anger and hatred and addictions and all of these things that are holding us apart. You help them heal from that, even if it took you a whole year. And the next year, they both went and just helped 2 more people. Now at that point, all you have is those 4 plus those 2. Really, you've only helped 6 people, and it's been 3 years, including yourself. However, if that continued for the next 33 years, passing it on, 2 people, helping 2 people, helping 2 people, 33 years, you've helped over 8 billion people. You've literally changed the world, starting with changing that person in the mirror.
Thank you, Paul. This has been incredible, and I feel like we could have gone for a few more hours, but thank you for being here.